Okay, again, thanks everybody for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Katrina Moore.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you all for being here today. Um, yes, we are going to have a great conversation about creating a culturally responsive atmosphere for ML students and families. So I'm glad you're here. I want to make this a very kind of relaxed and engaging hour for us. So you will have time to give feedback and ask any questions that you want. I will introduce myself. My name is Katrina Moore. I'm the Youth Service Center Coordinator at Newcomer Academy in Jefferson County. And Newcomer Academy is a school for 8th through 12th graders, and it is a school comprised of immigrant and refugee students who are new to the United States. So all of our students here are learning English. They are all from different countries and have been in the United States for the majority have been in the US for less than 1 year. This year, though, we are expanding our A to G program, our Accelerate to Graduate program, which means that we do have some students who are coming back to Newcomer Academy from a different high school for the A to G program, which will help them catch up on credits and help them graduate on time. So that's a little bit about the Newcomer Academy and the environment in which I work for some context. And we will go ahead and get started with the presentation. One disclaimer, I gave the same disclaimer when I presented at Victory Over Violence. So that disclaimer is that for the purposes of our audience and for this presentation, I am assuming zero kind of knowledge around the topic. And that's not because I think that this entire group has zero knowledge, just in an effort to make it accessible to everyone who might be with us today. We will be speaking from a place of kind of beginning the journey towards cultural responsiveness. So that said, I recognize that there's probably people listening today or here with us that could probably teach on this topic better than I could. So I am just here to share my experience, my perspective. But again, there are many of you who probably have walked this walk longer than I have and who could do a much better job. So that's my disclaimer here. We're all here to learn together. So once again, I appreciate you being here. I will also say that I am speaking from a perspective of being in a very resource dense environment. Here in Jefferson County Public Schools, I have a lot of resources at my disposal when it comes to serving multilingual learners. So, in some sense, I do recognize that it is a lot easier for me to do this work than it might be for some of you elsewhere in the state who might not be in such a resource dense area where you don't have a lot of partnerships to rely on and other resources in the community. So, that said, let's start with what is cultural responsiveness? First, it is active. It is not just cultural awareness. So it's not just knowing about other cultures. It's actively, for us, it would be creating programs and services that are accessible and high quality based on those cultural differences. It is a journey, not a checklist. So it's not something where you just do a few things and suddenly you are considered culturally responsive. It is an ongoing process where you learn, you adjust, and you continue to change the way you're doing things to make sure that you're serving your population. And I'm sorry, just to interrupt real quick. Melissa, I'm admitting people who are in the waiting room. Are you able to see that as well?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll
Yep.
stop. Okay, it's just popping up right in front of me. Okay, so to continue on, it requires empathy, respect, humility, and once again, action. And most importantly, the willingness to change the way you do things to meet the needs of others. So just to back up for a second, speaking on how it's a journey, I'm still 13-ish years into working within the Newcomer Academy community, still learning things. So, like you I'm constantly learning new things. For example, at the beginning of this year, we have a growing population from Sudan, and I was thinking about translating some documents into Sudanese Arabic to send home with our growing number of families from Sudan, but had to learn or be informed that Sudanese Arabic speakers actually, just while they might speak and require interpretation in Sudanese Arabic, they actually read just regular Arabic, and there is not a separate written script for Sudanese Arabic. So again, constantly learning, constantly new things to keep in mind. Um, let's see, moving on, honors diversity of culture in programming, services, relationships, and communication, and incorporates cultural knowledge into interactions and practices. Why it matters. Kentucky classrooms are increasingly diverse. I'm sure everyone who is on this meeting has their own experiences, whether you've been with your school for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, about how your populations within your school have changed dramatically in terms of multilingual learners. Immigrant and refugee families face unique challenges, whether it's cultural, linguistic, policy, anything like that. And we play a critical role in building inclusive environments. Cultural responsiveness leads to stronger engagement, trust, attendance, and academics. And it can make the life of a FRYSC easier. So, and that's true. I know, I mean, even myself in the beginning, a lot of this takes a lot of work and effort. And sometimes it's just like, man, like, will it be worth it to invest in different things to increase cultural responsiveness? But I promise you, like personally, I've seen how it really does just make my life easier to do the hard work up front. And in the long run, serving your multilingual families can be a lot easier and make you the go-to person in your building. So become that go-to person in your building where everyone else continues to think that, oh, serving multilingual families is so hard. Yes, it can be in the beginning. It takes a lot of investment, but in the end, you become that person. So be that go-to person in your building. Take a little extra on in the short term, but it will have long-term benefits. Who are multilingual learners? These are students who are learning English in addition to home languages. So there is a lot of diversity within the multilingual learning community. So you could have some students who are literate in 0 languages, including the languages they speak in their home country, so that while they might speak Swahili, they might never have become literate in that language, or Arabic or Kinyarwanda. Or you might have students who are literate in multiple languages, who are bringing a lot of skills to your school. They have, again, like I said, have varying degrees of literacy in their first language or languages. This population of multilingual learners can include immigrants, refugees, or US born. So here at Newcomer Academy, we have a lot of students who were born in the US, taken back across the border as infants, and now years later are coming back to us. So they have kind of their own blended cultural identities as well. They can be newly arrived or secondary migrants. So they could be brand new to the country, or they could have spent time, they could have come from another city. So spent time in Minneapolis or New York or somewhere in Texas or California before coming to your city. They could also have varying degrees of eligibility. So I'm sure that's something that a lot of you guys in your centers have come across. How do you know which students are eligible for government assistance? How do you know which students aren't? And that can be a touchy subject. Student multilingual families can bring rich cultural and linguistic assets. They can relocate voluntarily for opportunity or flee due to conflict, persecution, or disaster. They face common experiences, trauma, language barriers, acculturation stress, and interrupted education. And it does include the unaccompanied minor population. So here at Newcomer Academy, we have a lot of students who cross the border on their own as teenagers and who are either living here on their own or with a sponsor or with family, distant relatives that they've never met before. So that unaccompanied minor population is a really special population to serve as well. And we can talk more about that later if you have questions about your unaccompanied minor population. So let's be honest, we want to support multilingual students, but fear missteps and uncomfortable situations. We have questions that sometimes we are afraid to ask for a number of reasons. So this today is going to be a judgment-free space. I am not an expert. Like I said, I know for a fact that there are probably some of you in this group that could teach on this topic better than I could. In this session, we will address real questions with care and action. And then I last gave this presentation in person, where we utilized note cards for people to ask questions anonymously if they wanted to. But here, since we're virtual, I thought that along the way, if you wanted to ask an anonymous question, you are welcome to email me. I've got my email pulled up here, and I can put my email address in the chat. Oops. Or if you would like to ask a question for the group, feel free and put a question into the chat if you don't mind everyone seeing your question, and we will address them throughout the presentation. So this really is not meant to be a sit and get. Um, this is a kind of a Q&A, and let's just have a discourse. So I am going to start with some questions that you might have wondered yourself, that we can talk about. And then at the end, I will start taking some questions either anonymously or in the group chat that we can talk about as a group. And really, again, I'm coming from a different situation than you guys might. I'm in Jefferson County, an urban setting. I have a lot of resources, but I know a lot of you guys are kind of out there just in your kind of your own resource, having to figure it out, and you're kind of the only person there who can come in as a reference to help your families. So in some ways, in a lot of ways, your job is a lot harder than mine. So I would love to hear your experience as well at the end. But let's move on with some softball questions, some easy ones to get us started. How do I pronounce a student's name? So I know a lot of you guys have students, and some of their names are pretty straightforward, but other names, particularly from some languages, you're just like, man, like, do I even try this? Will I be, hurting their feelings if I try and make a mistake? So here's some best practices. Just do your best. Ask for the correct pronunciation. Practice and don't be afraid to mess up. Students really appreciate when you ask for the correct pronunciation, and you practice it and you kind of aren't afraid to mess up. It shows trust, and that they can not be afraid to mess up with you either while they're practicing their English. Although I think somebody raised it before, like some students, they want to be called something else than what their name is. Maybe sometimes they might choose that instead of being called Angel, they want to be called Angel, and that's totally up to them. So when in doubt, ask. One thing to keep in mind is that names are part of identity and reflect cultural norms. So I'll give an example of Swahili speakers. So in the Swahili speaking culture, and this was told to me a student a long while back. In the Swahili culture, when a baby is born, their first name might be the feeling that their mother felt upon seeing the baby for the first time. That's why a lot of times with these students, you'll have a joy or a joyous or thankful or a name like that as their first name. And then their second name will be their Christian name or their given name. So that's just something to keep in mind because I know a lot of times we might look at a name and be like, man, why do I have so many Joys or Queens? And that's just something for you to keep in the back of your mind. Respect naming conventions. So when students have two last names or if their family name is first. So a lot of our Spanish speakers have those dual last names, and it's very important to those families that they keep those last names and that they are called by those two last names. In the Kinyarwanda speaking cultures, sometimes, not all the time, which makes it very complicated, I know, but the name that the student is called might be their second name on government paperwork, or it might be the first. So that can make it very, very difficult for us as FRYSCs, but I think knowing is the first step to just not becoming frustrated with that, as I know it can be frustrated. Also, keep in mind that names can have roots in colonialism. So I'll tell on myself here. In one of my first years working at Newcomer Academy, we had a student from Rwanda, and his name was Francois, which is what I knew to be a French name or a name with French roots. So I, in my naivety, started speaking to this student in French, assuming that because his name was Francois, that he could also speak French. But he could not speak French. He only spoke Kinyarwanda. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that I had kind of um, committed a faux pas, so to speak. And that could have been, I don't know if it was offensive to him or not, but due to the Belgians, who are notoriously vicious colonialist invaders, the Belgians invaded or occupied Rwanda. And that's why you have a lot of people from that area who have French names. So if I could go back, I would not assume that that student could speak French just because his first name was Francois, because I do realize now that he or his family might have certain feelings about why about their country's history in connection to colonialism. So I was sure to remember that moving on. Another one, what if I don't know where their country is? It's okay not to know. There's a lot of countries. Be curious. Some of them are smaller than the county that you might live in, and they're learning too. You know, they're learning uh, about their new city, their new county, their new state. So while they're learning, be curious and get to know where they're from. Learn together about geography, history, and traditions. I know Americans, just in general, as a group, we might know less about geography than other people. So it's a good opportunity to learn more about geography, the history of the countries they're coming from, and the traditions. Try your best to distinguish between continents and countries. So Africa is a really big place, right? So try to, and I'm guilty of it as well, but next time, instead of saying like the African students or the African student, try to remember where that student is from. Because, for example, within the continent of Africa, there's numerous different religions. There's hundreds of languages spoken. There's people of all different skin colors, and just histories and cultures. So when you say the African kids, that includes a very diverse group of students. So try to distinguish between students from different countries and avoid assumptions and generalizations. And I'm sure that is good for just about everything in life, but particularly when talking about where students are from. Let's see. Can I say ESL student? So this was actually a really good conversation that we had over the summer because, and I don't know about your school districts, but here in Jefferson County, there was a really big, I guess, line in the sand where they said, do not say ESL kid anymore, or do not say ELL anymore, which I was like, didn't they just tell us to start saying ELL like last year? It's like things are constantly changing. So the new, I guess, correct terminology is multilingual learner or ML. And there were some people in the room over the summer that was like, that's the first time hearing about this. So I don't know if this is a something from the state or if it's something at the federal level. And I don't know county to county what that looks like, but at least here in Jefferson County, there was a pretty I guess, fine line in the sand of we're not going to say ESL or ELL anymore, but we utilize multilingual learner as best practice. So maybe something to talk about at your school or within your county. Because there was a lot of people over the summer who were kind of like, yeah, that didn't come down to our county. And not that it matters to me personally, but might just be something to know where your county stands on that. And if it is like I said, I don't even know if it's a state guideline or a federal guideline. But I think the reasoning behind that is that multilingual learner just better encompasses the diversity behind the population. Whereas English might not be their second language. It could be their eighth or their 10th. And remember, language is distinct from nationality. Instead of saying the Spanish kids, say the Spanish speaking students. Because if someone is Spanish, if that is their nationality, then they are from the country of Spain. So just try in the future addressing them as the Spanish speaking students. But again, that includes a very diverse group. I will say this is my first time giving this presentation virtually, and it is a lot different. It is a very different experience than giving it in person. So um, bear with me as we go through this. I might change some things up for a virtual audience next time, but I hope it's going okay for you. It is much different giving it in person, but
You're
again,
doing great. You're doing
thank
great, Katrina.
you.
I'm
Thank
learning a
you.
lot. And it is very different. Yeah.
It is
So
very different, but please don't hesitate. You don't have to wait. If you've got a question to put through on the chat or an anonymous question in an email, feel free to do that at any time. We don't have to wait till the end. But I will just keep moving along unless I get a question from the audience. And again, if any of you guys have feedback, is there a raise your hand option in Zoom? If you have feedback or if there's anything I say like, oh, actually my county did this, feel free to raise your hand or jump in, but I'll keep moving along. Ooh, this is a good one. How do I communicate if they don't speak English? Um, Especially if you're new to the FRYSC role or new in your school, this can be a big one that can be difficult to navigate. I have visitors who come to Newcomer Academy all the time, and they're like, well, how do you communicate? And I don't know if I remember thinking though, when I first started here, just how I guess surprised I was just to learn for myself how much communication is nonverbal, and how much just a smile or a welcome can go a long way in breaking the ice with someone that you don't speak the same language with. But just again, here speaking from experience and best practice, some things to remember is that language does not equal intelligence. So I'm sure you guys probably all have a story of where you have been in the front office or you've witnessed a situation in which an ML family comes in. I mean, it's clear that they're learning English, and maybe it's someone in the office, or even you might have done it before that because they appear to be learning English, you start speaking louder because you think that they'll understand you better, or that the way they speak means that they are uneducated when really it's just they're learning another language. Use visuals, gestures, or peer buddies. So I will give a caveat here, and this is a good conversation as well. So I know a lot of schools um, utilize other students to interpret. for students, or you might even utilize a student to interpret for a parent. I will say the best practice is not to use a child as an interpreter for a parent. However, I do have situations here at school where I will use peer buddies to help interpret, especially if it's something where a student is just asking for something or has a general question. We have language line capabilities here in JCPS where I can call an interpreter on demand and have them interpret for me. That's my go-to. I realize that that might not be available in every county. If you don't know if that's a resource in your county, I would encourage you to ask and find out if it is. If it is a resource and you have been afraid to use it or you've never spoken through an interpreter before, I challenge you to just try it. It is intimidating, but it is very easy. Somebody asked me over the summer, well, what if a parent comes in and brings their kid along to use as the interpreter? And my response to that would be they might have just done that because they weren't sure that you had interpretation services available, but I can almost guarantee that 9 out of 10 times a parent would prefer to have a third-party interpreter than to use their child, just to make sure that the message, that whatever message they have or you have is getting across clearly. So again, on that third one, use interpreters or translation tools. It really depends on availability. I'm not sure what's available in your counties. Again, check and see what's available. I'm going to give you permission right here to admit. Oh, sorry, I was just looking at the messenger. What was I saying? Oh, I'm giving you permission right here to use Google Translators asterisk under certain circumstances in certain situations. So I know using Google Translate can be taboo and has been taboo, like, oh, you shouldn't use it. I use it every day under certain circumstances. Depending on what the job is that you need to get done, Google Translate can be a very helpful tool. Now, if it has anything to do with a legal issue or a behavior issue or something like that, I will always use an on-demand interpreter. But make Google Translate your best friend, especially in our centers and when students are just coming in with a brief request. Google Translate can be very useful, and Google Translate is pretty good. I've kind of double checked some languages with some of our bilingual staff in the building, and most of the languages are pretty decent. So don't be afraid. I'm giving you permission to use Google Translate when you need to. I've already said it, but avoid using students as interpreters with parents. Again, if that's all you have, oh, what is going on? If that's all you have to work with, then that's what you got. But try not to use students as interpreters with parents. Warmth through nonverbal communication. Like I said, a smile goes a long way. And lack of shared language is not an excuse to not engage or to do nothing. A former employer, not to be named, but a former employer I had was really just hesitant to do any publication about programs in different languages because I guess their thinking was, well, we can have all these flyers in different languages, but if they come into the building and we can't like speak with them, what's the point? And I don't think that's the right approach. So lack of shared language is not an excuse to not engage. It is all the reason to engage. Because some really close relationships to the school have been made through just attempting to communicate, even if we could not communicate fluently between each other. And our communities deserve to be served, right? Like that's what we signed up to do. So please do not be, I know it can be scary to communicate with a family or a student who speaks literally no English, but a lot can be accomplished with very little. How do I have the hygiene talk? Now, this question is much more fun talking about in person. I will have to say, we had a good time with this discussion when it was in person, but this is a tough one um, because most of us, a lot of us, I'm sure, have those kids in our building who are just like, man, how do I talk to them about whatever they got to do to be smelling better, right? One, a first step is understanding cultural differences. So, cultural habits, clothing, diet, access to clean water, keeping in mind that a lot of our students come from places where the only clean water that they had was the water that they drank, and it would be a sin to use clean water for any other purpose other than drinking. Um, Cultural habits too. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was like, "Yeah, I'm sure that the kids that he has in his building walk around talking about how he's the funny guy wearing perfume. It's just something we use perfume and cologne here in the United States, and the cologne in other countries is the personal smell, so to speak. So just remember cultural differences. Um, that said, it is something that I feel the personal responsibility to address. That even though I can recognize that it comes from cultural differences, I still have the responsibility to inform, to give the information to students about what we do here in the United States and what the expectations are in the workplace, in school, in other schools that they might go to. So here at Newcomer Academy, we have a very comfortable environment. There's a lot of people here with similar hygiene customs, but it is my responsibility to share information and to give them the real straight talk about, hey, like here it's one way, but when you go to your new school, when you go to your new high school or new middle school, it might be a lot different. So you just need to be prepared about what cultural expectations are. So choose the right setting and approach. Sometimes the right setting is one-on-one. Sometimes it's with a group. And I really just have to read the situation. Utilize an adult or community leader who shares the language and culture. I have found this really beneficial. I'll utilize a community partner that speaks both Swahili and Kinyarwanda to come in and speak to that group about personal hygiene because they can speak from a place of knowing and understanding because they came from those same places as my students. Also read the room. Huber can be a great tool. So group settings, sometimes I'll just pull a group of boys together, and especially some of my better English speakers who understand comedic nuance. I'll be just say like, hey, you guys stink. And the humor in that just kind of like breaks the ice a little bit. They start kind of ribbing each other and making fun of each other, but the result is that we have broken the ice. We have become comfortable with each other where we can say like, hey, okay, you got to start washing your clothes more regularly. You got to start wearing deodorant so that, whatever, like, so that the girls like being around you. Who knows? Read the room. Humor can be a great tool. It can also not be a great tool. So, um, just know your kids. That's the best advice I can give you is to create the relationships first. Like I said, do the hard work in the beginning so conversations like these can be easier in the long run. Offer solutions and support. So it's one thing to give information and to say like, hey, it might be a lot harder of an audience at your new school. It's one thing to give that information, but not offer solutions. So something I do in my center, I have laundry self-service. I have a donated washer and dryer that I have where students who have come to me or who I know of kind of have difficulty cleaning their clothes. Can I give them like a garment bag, and once a week they take the garment bag home and they'll bring it full with dirty clothes, and I have them do it. I do not do it. I do enough of my own dirty laundry, but I'll bring the students in and I accompany them to the machine. They put their dirty clothes in. I teach them how to use it. I give them a note for what time to come back, switch it to the dryer, give them another note for to come and collect it, and they can do that once a week. And hygiene items, a big thing is education. So deodorant. I mean, how much is a stick of deodorant? It can be what, up to $8. So um, some students don't know where to buy it. They don't know what it is. They've never used it. They don't know where to put it on their body, that's to say. So we do a lot of education around what products to buy, where you can buy the products at a lower price, the order of operations. So you first take your clothes off, you get in the shower, use this product on this part of your body. You get out of the shower, you then use this product on this part of your body. So a lot of education around that. And then follow up and consider it if the issue could be the result of neglect or abuse. So there's always that possibility, right? That it could not just be a cultural misunderstanding or the need for information, but it could be the result of neglect or abuse. But we are all as FRYSCs kind of should feel comfortable kind of parsing that out. All right. We are nearing up on the end. I think we've got 20 minutes to go. So I only have a few slides left, so please start sending in the questions if you have any, if there's anything you want to discuss as a group, or if you genuinely have been afraid to ask, now's the time, because we are again in a judgment-free zone. We are assuming zero, we are assuming a baseline of zero in the journey towards cultural responsiveness. So again, if you joined us late, I know there's people in the group who you're just starting on trying to build cultural responsiveness, or you've been doing this for a lot longer than I have. So there's a lot of experience in the room, so to speak, here. So use the opportunity to ask questions and get some feedback from youth service centers across the state. So, how to build a culturally responsive atmosphere. Again, dependent on the resources available to you. I am not here preaching about the best way to do things, because I fully realize that here in Jefferson County, I have so many resources available to me. I have so many places I can refer kids. I have so many community partners that I can bring in to help me. And I know that a lot of you guys out there are on your own. So it's dependent on the resources available to you. Take stock of what those resources are. You only have so much you can do, right, with what you have available to you. But take a moment to just kind of take an inventory of what's available to you. If you don't know if your county has on-demand interpretation services, find out how to use it and become that go-to person. It will look different based on your ML population. So I know I'm speaking to some of you who only have Spanish speakers as part of your ML population. Then there's others of you who are like me, who have between 20 and 30 different languages spoken in your school. So keep that in mind as well. For some of you, you have students who are not eligible for government assistance. Some of you have some students who are and some students who aren't. So that definitely impacts how you do your job. It takes effort, but a little goes a long way. It will never be perfect and will always be changing. And it's achieved through engagement and getting out of your comfort zone. Avoid generalizations and be a leader in helping others do the same. So if you hear stuff, like, oh, well, she can't be Muslim because she doesn't wear hijab. Be the first person to speak up and just start from a place of informing. Like, not all Muslims wear hijab or speak Arab. Not all Muslims speak Arabic. Not all Muslims fast during Ramadan. Just like not all Christians, ... Let's see, partnering with ML families, multilingual signage and targeted programs and services. A lot of you guys already do a lot of this, I know. Invite families as cultural experts. Some of you guys are really good because I've heard you talk about it, um, about having families within your building that you bring in to kind of do the heavy lifting as far as some of your family nights. And you have your cultural experts right there. So if you have a group of parents that you're having some difficulty with, find a parent or a family who you can engage with and be like, hey, I really need your help talking to this population of students here at the school. As for preferred communication methods, I have found that US mail is my best way of getting information to my families. In the digital age, that sounds crazy, but US mail is what has worked best for me. Now, I did use WhatsApp in the past. I don't think any of us are allowed to use WhatsApp except with parents, right? So, um, I utilize WhatsApp to communicate with parents because a lot of families who don't have like a paid phone line can still have a phone number through WhatsApp that you can communicate with them on. Respect family constraints and avoid assumptions. Avoid assuming their documentation status. So avoid assuming that that because they're from this country, they're quote unquote documented, or because they're from this country, they must be undocumented. Immigration law is very complicated. It's complicated for a reason, and that reason is to make sure that nobody can understand the ins and outs of it. So immigration law is very complicated. So avoid just assuming documentation status, avoid assuming what different families are eligible for as far as government benefits. Now there are guidelines that you can go by. So like for me, I know the great majority of my students who are from Africa or the Middle East, um, or Southeast Asia are here through a refugee agency, which means that they are eligible for government assistance. That is a guideline that I can typically go by. Another guideline I can typically go by is that my students from Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador are typically undocumented. There are outliers though, so I try not to I do not try my best not to assume, but those are certain guidelines that I can go by. And that is important for us to know as FRYSC because we need to know how to help different families. So you should, as a FRYSC, know what you can refer families who are not eligible for government assistance, how to help them with food and housing. That's going to look a lot different than helping a family who is documented, helping them with food and housing and whatnot. Home visits can be a very powerful tool, but always follow best practices as far as home visits go. So some practical next steps. Find out what resources are available to you in your district if you don't already know, and bookmark or favorite them, add shortcuts to your computer, make it easy on yourself. Perfect. Um, yes, I will get to that at the end here. Find out what resources are available to you, learn student name pronunciation and spell. So these are challenges these are takeaways. So, what is it today? Wednesday? Maybe by the end of next week, you try a few of these things. Next week, by Christmas break, whatever. Add multilingual labels in your center. Make Infinite Campus your best friend and learn where to find key information. So there is a lot you can find out about a student in Infinite Campus with regard to what language they speak, whether there's a refugee agency contact, whatnot. Find out who in your community has the same questions you do and who might have the answers. Google it. I Google things every day. What language do they speak in this country? How many different languages do they speak in this country? Trying to think of one of the last things I Googled, but Google, I give Google a lot of business for all the questions I ask about different countries and languages and all that. Pledge to avoid deficit thinking in your language. Pledge to avoid deficit thinking in your language when discussing MLs. focus on strengths and assets. So I will give a little anecdote. When I was looking at elementary schools for my daughter, I went to visit the elementary schools that were in my zone. And one of the schools that I went to, the person, it was an administrator who was kind of showing us around, kept using deficit language when talking about the MLs, like, oh, it's just so hard for our teachers, and it's just so hard to serve them, and it makes teaching, and yes, I believe all things are true. It is an added challenge to serve ML population. But that did not give me a good feeling about that school, especially, having a daughter who receives support services now through the school she goes to, like I didn't want them using similar deficit language about students needing any type of support services. So avoid deficit thinking, focus on strengths and assets. Don't be afraid to speak up if you hear that deficit language in your building. So yes, we had a comment. Perhaps part 2 of this training is discussing some of those resources for undocumented individuals. Thank you for that. And that is absolutely correct. It would take an entire separate webinar to cover that topic. But that is great. If you have specific questions about that, feel free to reach out to me and I can share with you some of the resources I use for undocumented individuals. I will be happy to share those resources with any of you. But yes, that is a lot to talk about in and of itself. Okay, got about 10 minutes left. I have some reflection questions for the road, and then we will end with any final questions. Oh, thank you so much. Yes. I'm glad that this information was helpful for you. Yes, thank you so much. So some reflection questions for the road, just for you to think about in your own journey and to share with others. So if you feel confident in your journey about cultural responsiveness, be that person again in your building who starts the trend for others. So what assumptions or generalizations do you carry? What is the source of your fear or discomfort in engaging with people of different cultures? Is it that you're afraid of looking dumb, or, what is the source of your fear and discomfort? And maybe once you start to think about that, you can start heading in the right direction. Am I willing to reframe my mistakes as growth? Again, I have made so many mistakes over the past 13 years of working at Newcomer Academy. What support do I need from my school or district? Go to your principal and say, hey, I don't know what we have available, but we need to find out. Go to your district. What does our district have available? If it is available in your district, why isn't that information being shared? Why aren't there trainings in your district about how to utilize the interpretation services that you have? So that's what I have, reflection questions. I'll go to the chat now because I do see a few extra comments here. Is there a one-stop shop to learn about different cultures or a great resource that you have found helpful, particularly about personal relationships or interactions? Ooh, good question. A one-stop shop. I would love anybody to hop in here in the chat and see what you found helpful. Again, I'm kind of like an investigative person. So Wikipedia is my best friend. If I'm just curious about, like, say we get a student from a new country that we've never had a student from that country before, like Wikipedia is my first place to just read about the history and social aspects, ways that those people like to communicate or don't like to communicate. So I don't have a one-stop shop. I don't know if anybody else does. More information on undocumented families would be helpful. Okay, Melissa, it sounds like we need to do another Wednesday webinar on resources for undocumented families. Yes, I understand that is a huge challenge. So maybe that's another one that we have later down the road. Here in Louisville, where I am, we have an organization called La Casita Center that's really good about sharing information with us, and they work directly with the undocumented population here in Louisville. I would do a quick Google search to see if you guys have a nonprofit or organization like that locally that would be willing to come in and either one-on-one with you share that information with you, because again, it could look different city to city, county to county. And it depends on kind of I guess the atmosphere, the social political atmosphere where you are to, as far as what it looks like to work with those families and where those families feel comfortable going for information and for services. That can look a lot different county to county. I know one county said that they tried to offer like a resource night for undocumented families at the county courthouse. And that did not go over so well. They surprisingly had nobody show up. So I think it depends a lot on where you are. But do a quick Google search to see if you have any local resources for serving the undocumented population. Again, here in Louisville, we have something called La Casita Center. I would be interested to see if there's other places like that around the state. Do I partner with public libraries? I do to some extent. Jefferson County being so big, there's so many libraries, and it's not like like just within my radius here, there's like several libraries. So I do partner with the libraries kind of in a general sense, but I do believe in some smaller communities, the library can be a very powerful tool in reaching your multilingual families. Whereas here in Louisville, it's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like there's just so much that the libraries are just kind of like, yeah, like one of a dozen other community resources. But maybe in your area, the library could be like that one spot that could really be helpful to you.
I do know they offer a lot of, books and, their media in lots of different languages. So
Yeah. Yes. Um, Yes, indeed. Any other questions before we wrap up? Thank you guys so much. This was a lot different doing it virtually than in person. I think it's better in person personally because you get the kind of the more back and forth, whereas I'm literally looking at my own presentation on the screen in front of me and not your faces. But um, thank you guys and look forward to meeting you. Thank you so much, Jenny. Anybody, feel free to email me. I'll be happy to share whatever resources I have with you. And that's all I have.